here. It's 9:30. We still have a few people showing up in the wait room. So I think if you're all good with it, maybe we hang tight for just a couple minutes and get everybody in and then we'll get started. See some familiar names here. That's good to see. And some new ones too. All right. I can continue to monitor the wait room if Jake and Allison, if we want to get this rolling.
Sure, we can get started. Good morning, everybody, and welcome. Thank you for joining us for the second of our grant writers workshops. We'll do some quick introductions. My name is Jake Wilson. I am one of the 21st Century CLC consultants for DPI. I've been here for a few months now. Previously, I was at different after-school sites throughout the Madison area with MSCR, Public School District, and Beaver Court Neighborhood Center most recently.
Go next. Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you all. My name is Nathan Worley. I too am a 21st Century CLC consultant with the Department of Public Instruction. I have Jake beat by about 3 months in terms of my tenure here at DPI. Prior to this, I was working for Menasha Joint School District overseeing OST and CLC programs district-wide for a number of years. So happy to be here and thankful to see all of you here this morning. Happy Friday.
And good morning, everyone. My name is Allison Weinberg. I'm the third consultant on our team at DPI, and I've been with the agency for almost been 16 years. It'll be 16 years next month. So I've got these two beat by just a little bit, but I'm happy to see all of you joining us this morning. Happy to see the interest that we've been able to garner this year for the competition. It's always an exciting time when we launch the competition and to see all the ideas floating around the state with this program. So we're excited to share some information about the program with you this morning and happy to answer some questions as we get going. We also want to introduce another member of our team joining us this morning. Steph LaHaye, our grant specialist, is also on the line with us today. Steph, do you want to say a quick hi?
Sure. Morning, everybody. I'm the grant specialist with SSPW, and I help out with the CLC team. Nice to see y'all.
All right. So just a couple housekeeping things about how this webinar will work. We'll ask everybody to stay on mute and use the chat feature for questions. We'll do our best to answer them in real time. There might be some that we come back to at the end, but feel free to drop questions throughout the presentation in the chat. We are recording in case you missed that message earlier, so just be aware that this webinar is being recorded. And if you miss anything, we'll post it and send it out later so you can rewatch. While we're presenting, it might be helpful to have a few things open. So number one is the application content document. The grant rubrics will also help kind of give you an idea of what reviewers will be looking for in the applications. And of course, the application guidelines are also helpful to have handy. So Allison just put those in the chat if you want to take a look at those. And we'll also be dropping other links that are on the slides throughout the presentation. All right. We'll be going over an overview of the grant program itself, and then kind of walk you through the process. So whether it's your first time or you've been through it a couple times, we'll give you an idea of the timeline and how awards are processed, and then eligibility, funding priorities, program requirements, and proposal requirements. Allison will walk you through a tour of the portal and show you around WISE grants, and we'll also share some resources and of course have questions and answers at the end. All right. So for those of you unfamiliar with the 1965 Every Student Succeeds Act, it was initially created provide funding for after-school programs and school day programs. In 1994, they added the American Schools Act, which is the reauthorization that added about $750,000 for after-school programs throughout the country. So over the last several decades, the program has grown, and we're now being provided over $1 billion in funding, and about 1.5 million youth being served every year. So that's kind of the idea of what the CLC program is a part of. It's a huge federal program now, and a lot of programs nationally being involved in this. If you want to read through this document later on, it's very light fireside reading. All right, and here's just a short video that'll kind of give you an introduction to the 21st CLC program.
Does your community have students in need of expanded opportunities for learning and a safe place to be before or after school, school closures, or during the summer? Do you want to further engage with your students' adult family members? Well, the Nita M. Lowy 21st Century Community Learning Centers Grant, or more simply put, the 21st CCLC grant, is one way you might be able to meet those needs. The 21st CCLC grant has been administered by DPI dating back to 2002 as part of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, or ESEA. And whether your community identifies as urban or rural, whether your students are in pre-kindergarten or 12th grade, 21st CCLCs exist primarily to serve those students and families who need the most support. The goals and purpose of 21st CCLCs are to 1. Provide opportunities for academic enrichment to assist students in meeting the state academic standards. 2. Offer students access to a broad array of additional activities, such as those that focus on youth development, social and emotional learning, civic engagement, and nutritional and physical health. And 3. Offer adult family members of program participants opportunities for educational development and engagement in their children's education. From mentoring to literacy and mathematics education, to arts and music programs, to counseling, to physical activity programs, to programs that build skills in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, or STEM, to programs that develop career readiness skills, to apprenticeship programs, to other possibilities. 21st CCLCs afford students and their adult family members experiences they may not otherwise have. In other words, dream big, and chances are that 21st CCLC grant funds can help to realize that dream. Now that you know a bit more about it, you might be wondering, is this grant right for my school or organization? 21st CCLC funds support out-of-school time programs that primarily serve students from schools that are school-wide Title I eligible, and many different types of organizations may apply for grant funds. You may be one of them. Grants are awarded through a competitive process and generally last for 5 years. For qualifying schools, 21st CCLC grant funds can be a great way to keep youth engaged in positive activities outside of the typical school day. Such programs are key to realizing our shared mission of educational equity and the vision that every Wisconsin student becomes a graduate, college, and career ready. For more information, please visit the 21st CCLC website. Does your community have students in need of?
All right. So now that you've heard a little bit about the 21st Century program, a little bit about the background and how it came to be, we want to dive a little bit deeper into the grant process and the background of the program itself. DPI has developed a lot of resources to support current grantees and potential grantees. And one of those resources is our Wisconsin 21st CCLC guiding principles. And you can see these 12 guiding principles up on the screen here. These are these common quality elements that we've identified for high quality 21st CCLC programs around the state of Wisconsin. And these are intended to be kind of guiding elements for quality, things that all programs should be striving for to have in their program. So things such as opportunities for youth voice, academic enrichment, diverse programming, family engagement opportunities, strong leadership, sustainability and sound fiscal management practices, those kinds of things. To learn more about what these will look like, we have these on our website in more detail, and we encourage you to take a look at them as you're putting your proposal together. These serve as a resource not only for our current grantees, but also for potential applicants. So that's an important resource for you. Next slide. In terms of where these programs exist in the state of Wisconsin, we do serve communities throughout the state of Wisconsin. And currently we're directly funding 148 sites in Wisconsin. That 148 sites is a little bit misleading because even within the 148 directly funded sites, they also serve what we call feeder programs. And those could be additional schools in addition to the targeted schools that they serve. So those could be, if they are targeting an elementary school, they also might serve some students at a nearby middle school or at another nearby elementary school. And so we call those feeder sites. So that that 148 number is actually much bigger than that. But we directly fund 148 sites currently around the state of Wisconsin. Next slide. So each year the DPI publishes an annual executive summary kind of summarizing how 21st century programs are operating, the kinds of services that they're providing, and how, kind of some of the outcomes that we're seeing as a result of these services. And the most recent published executive summary is the 2020-21 executive summary. And for the purpose of today's workshop, we opted to share the 1920 data. And the reason we're doing that is because the 2020-21 data, frankly, is not typical. It's a really interesting report to read, and I encourage you to look at that. It's published on our website. It really tells a pretty powerful story about the impact of the pandemic and how that impacted our programs and how they really rose to the challenge of the pandemic and how that was impacting out of school time programs across the state of Wisconsin, but it certainly was not typical. And so for the purpose of today's presentation, we opted to share some information that was maybe a little bit more illustrative of what a typical 21st century kind of program looks like around the state of Wisconsin. And so we decided to share 1920 data. Now, understand, obviously, 1920 even wasn't necessarily typical because schools closed in March of 1920 or in 2020, but it was a little bit closer to what we might see in a typical year. So in the 1920 school year, we had 132 granted centers around the state of Wisconsin. And that year, our program served a total of about 20,000 students, with about 9,000 students being served on a typical day. Across the state of Wisconsin, we saw 765 community partnerships engaged in work. Those community partnerships ranged tremendously from large youth serving organizations such as YMCAs or Boys and Girls Clubs or 4-H to small organizations such as a local yoga organization or even a local artist or faith-based organizations or really a fiscal or a financial bank or even sometimes grocery stores. All kinds of community partnerships get involved in the work that we see at the CLC programs. It's really tremendous. These programs averaged almost 300 hours of service over the span of that school year, which is really remarkable thinking that the school year was shortened. If you think about it, it came to an average of about 44 additional school days These programs target some of the neediest students at the school, some of the students who are in need of additional academic supports, additional opportunities. And so if you think about the totality of service hours over the span of the school year and the opportunity that that creates in terms of contact time, it's really tremendous. The programs offer a wide variety of services and activities for students, including academic enrichment, which we'll be talking about a little bit more detail coming up here, what we mean by academic enrichment. They, that particular year, they were providing counseling services and support, and that has grown tremendously in most recent years. Half of the programs were providing mentoring services, and 97% of them that year were providing arts and music activities. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. We see many more kinds of activities and services being provided. And if you'd like to read more about the kinds of services and that are being provided in these programs, we encourage you to check out the evaluation and summary reports on our website. So in terms of the model of the grant program in and of itself, these grants are distributed on a 5-year funding model. We distribute them annually, but they are awarded for 5 years. It is dependent on our annual federal budget, and we award them on a competitive basis. And so obviously we're launching the competition. We're in the process of doing that right now. We don't know exactly how much money is going to be available in this year's competition, but that's not unusual. It's completely dependent on the federal budget, and we typically don't have that estimate until later on in the competition. So this isn't unusual. We do anticipate that we'll have a pretty hearty competition available for all of our applicants. So that, again, is not an unusual kind of situation. All of our application materials are posted and available. And so if you haven't already visited the website, you should see all of those materials there. And I see them being linked over in the chat. So you should be able to pull them up over there as well. In terms of the competition timeline, this is all very tentative and often does get adjusted as we move along, but this is what we're hoping to stick to this year. Obviously, we've released all of the materials this month, and we're hosting workshops this week. We're recording today's session, and we will be posting the sessions to our website, so you can always revisit the workshop and the slides on our website as soon as we're able to get those posted there. We will be recruiting our peer reviewers this month into next month and training those peer reviewers in December and January. The applications themselves are due on February 10th, and then the peer review process begins in February. In March, we'll be conducting our internal review of the applications and making our recommendations to the state superintendent's office. And our hope is to be able to announce the results of the competition to the applicants by the end of April. So that is our timeline, and I'm certainly hopeful and optimistic that we'll be able to stick to that. In terms of the funding requirements and priorities, you heard a little bit about this in the video, but the applicants themselves is pretty broad in terms of who is allowed to apply. Certainly public school districts, private school entities, charter school entities, community-based organizations, for-profit entities, higher education entities, just about anyone, any kind of organization is able to apply as long as they are able to target a qualifying school. And that is kind of the linchpin to being eligible to apply. And what we mean by a qualifying school is really the following. In order to be considered a qualifying school, the school must be considered eligible for Title I school-wide services. And so this can be a public school or a private school or a charter school, either a independent charter school or a public charter school, but they must be considered eligible for Title I school-wide. And so what we mean by eligible for that is basically 40% economically disadvantaged rate school population is kind of the entry point for that. In addition to that, they must be either in school improvement status per Title I designation. So that would be either the TSI, CSI, or ATSI status. We do recognize that that ATSI, TSI, and CSI is currently being updated. So you would go by what is currently published on the DPI website, and there's additional information on DPI if you're not sure of their current status. Or if the school has been identified by the local education agency as in need of intervention and support to improve academic achievement and other outcomes. So obviously this would apply to any other school that is not in Title I designation status. Now keep in mind that DPI does not maintain a list of schools that have been identified by the LEA to be in need of intervention and support to improve academic achievement or other outcomes. This is determined by the local education agency. So please be in contact with your local education agency to determine whether or not they have indeed identified the school as being in need of these kinds of interventions and support. In addition, the school must enroll students who might be at risk for academic failure, dropping out of school, involvement in criminal or delinquent activities, or who lack strong positive role models. DPI also is charged to consider additional funding additional requirements or priorities. So we also consider whether or not the program proposed already has, or the school already has programming targeting the student population, or if they are looking to expand existing programming, or if there is no programming at all currently at that targeted school. We also look to expand services or support services in communities that do not have services currently. So we consider equitable geographic distribution across the state of Wisconsin when making funding decisions. We also consider performance history for programs that have held 21st century grants previously. So that is part of our responsibility as well. So when you go to apply for your grant, you will see that you will be asked to identify a funding tier. So all the awards are issued according to this tiered funding model. And this is a kind of an important first step in your application process. And it should be kind of take a little bit of pause when you identify your funding tier, because this funding tier is directly tied to what we call a minimum average daily attendance. This average daily attendance will vary tremendously based on a couple of factors. One is the school enrollment. So a good rule of thumb is kind of that 20% rule. Generally speaking, an out of school time average daily attendance typically does not exceed about 20% of the school enrollment. That can vary and does vary. And certainly you have an opportunity in the application to explain why it might be higher than that. And you'll see that in the application. Another thing to consider is whether or not the students that you're targeting have access to other opportunities out of school time. So you don't want to compete for services. So if there are other kinds of programming currently being provided, you may need to consider that when identifying your funding tier. Another thing to consider are the ages and grades that you're proposing to serve. You might have a greater chance of serving a higher number of students in a lower and elementary level than perhaps at a high school level. And it completely depends on the population that you're targeting to serve, and the kinds of programming that you're proposing to serve or proposing to offer. So definitely pause to consider the kinds of activities, the programming that's currently being provided, and the population that you're targeting. So this is an important part to kind of give some thought to before you move forward in your application process. All right, I'm going to hand it off.
Yep, thanks, Allison. So I'm just going to walk over some of the very basic grant requirements. So number one, you need to operate no fewer than 10 hours per week and no fewer than 115 days during the school year. So summer programming is optional and does not count towards these 115 days. So this programming must occur during the school year. Every grantee must identify at least one external partner organization. We kind of alluded to that earlier, and we'll talk a little bit more about potential partners that you can collaborate with in your programming. And like I said before, yeah, programming must occur during out of school time hours. All program participants must receive academic enrichment services that align with state academic standards. So we'll be talking in more detail about each of these points in future slides, but a definition of academic enrichment is providing opportunities to develop academic knowledge and skills in ways that are different than what is being provided during the school day. Programs must offer at least 2 other allowable activities listed in the application guidelines. And also on the next slide, and all grantees must offer programming for the families of 21st century CLC participants. So that could mean a family night where parents come in and learn how to better help kids with their kids with their homework. It could be, job and resume support, just ways of offering support to the families. I will not go through all of these allowable activities, but just to give you an idea of the types of options that you can be creative with and kind of assess what are the biggest needs in your community and, what are the families of your students most searching for. So Nathan will be talking later about how to assess those program and student needs and how to build around them. You should be considering the strengths and capacities of your staff, your community, and the space, and also utilize those community partners that we'll be talking about too. Academic enrichment, as I mentioned before, should be helping students meet challenging state, local, and academic standards. So we're looking to embed core content learning into activities that reinforce and enhance academic learning without replicating the school day. They should be standards-based, developmentally appropriate, intentional, and sequential. So a way I would think about it is, you've probably heard the term scaffolding before. So you start with your base, but before you start, you kind of know what you're building up to. So maybe month by month, you're kind of building a foundation of learning for the students with an end goal in mind. You can also kind of work backwards. If you have an end goal or maybe a big field trip at the end of the year you want to work towards, how can you build the knowledge and skill base for your students throughout the school year to get there? Your academic enrichment activities should be different from school day instruction. So a lot of times it looks like active learning and kind of hands-on opportunities to apply learning to real-world problems. There's limitations to what the school day programming can offer. And so think of ways that your site can offer something different, while also kind of using some same terminology, building on the base of knowledge that students are gaining during the school day. So some examples could be project-based learning, learning centers, math and literacy games, and other performance-based activities. These are other requirements that we'll be going into in more detail in later slides. You can again refer to the application guidelines for best practices for OST programs. There'll be periodic local evaluation. That will include things like your YPR, your yearly progress report that's done through the YSIF portal. So that'll be a summary of services and programs, progress on your goals, attendance records, and other things to help both DPI and yourselves kind of assess where you're at and build some action steps for the next school year. There should be a dedicated program coordinator. There should be communication with the public, so kind of sharing what's going on in your programming, evaluation results, and availability of the programs that you're offering. There should be a safe and accessible environment. Transportation should be accessible for everybody. A coordination of funds. And so we'll talk in more detail about this as well, but the key phrase to remember is supplement, but not supplant. So 21st century CLC funds can be used to expand programming and funding, but not directly replace something that's already in place. And we also need to be considering planning for sustainability. So once the grant, the 5-year grant is over, how can your program continue and still be successful?
All right, so now we're going to kind of shift our attention to the actual application and dive a little bit deeper into the content of the application and the questions themselves. Our goal today is that you walk away from the workshop feeling like not only do you understand the 21st century program a little bit more and the purpose of the program, but that you also understand what it might take to actually prepare a successful application. The thing that I get excited about with the 21st Century Community Learning Center program is that it really is designed for applicants and for communities to have an opportunity to really dream big, to think about what are those opportunities, those experiences that they don't have the resources to support and to offer. And this is a chance to do that, right? To do that during an out of school time experience. And so that's really where we want you to start. And so before we start looking at the application, we want to kind of frame it out for you a little bit, because when you look at the application, it's really easy to get quickly overwhelmed, to be honest. It's a big application. There's a lot of questions, and it can be a little bit overwhelming if you just look at it off the bat. So we want to give you a little bit of perspective and some tips right away. The first thing is, please don't do this by yourself. Like, this should be a team effort. It is really helpful to have a few people in your corner helping prepare this application and helping to brainstorm some ideas and pulling some of the information together to best position yourself for preparing a high quality proposal. That's first and foremost. And the other piece is to think about really starting from the point of the dreaming element. What is it that you're trying to, what are you trying to do? Like, what is the big dream? Like, this program is not intended to be a childcare program. It's not intended to be a homework help program. It is really intended to provide students an opportunity for a new experience, a new opportunity that wouldn't otherwise be available to them. And so what are those needs, those gaps, those interests that they have that wouldn't otherwise be available? And what are those potential partnerships that are available to help you carry the load? What are those student populations that that need the most support that currently don't have access? And then what staff and community partnerships are available to help carry out the services if you receive the funds? So the application in and of itself, even though when you look at it, it might seem very vague, is really designed around this idea of the dream, study, plan, execute. What is the dream? What is the data to help support this dream? And what is your plan to carry it out? And then how are you going to make it happen? And so if you kind of come at it from that idea, you'll be able to answer these questions relatively easily. But please, please, please don't do it alone. And so if you kind of step back and have that perspective, I think the rest of it will start to fall into place. Next slide. Okay, so now that we've said that, now we'll share kind of the like, oh my goodness, these are all the sections. So there's a lot. However, keep in mind that not all of these are kind of the same load, right? So there's quite a few of them. Obviously, some of them are relatively brief. Obviously the first section, the general information, is just the name, who's the primary contact, that kind of thing. The first section that I want to draw your attention to is the abstract section, and that's only because that is the first place that you have a chance to tell your story. That is the first section that is rated by the peer reviewers. That's the first place for you to get points on your application. So that's certainly something worth drawing your attention to. There's not a lot of points assigned to the abstract section, but that's the first place for you to get some points. But more importantly, it's the first place for you to introduce yourself to the reviewer. So definitely take some time to think about what it is that you want to tell in that particular section, and how to summarize what it is that you're trying to achieve, what it is your dream is for this particular program. The assurances and the signatures are really important because these need to be signed by the agency authorizer and reviewed and signed by the agency authorizer. This is the individual who is legally authorized to sign off on this application. This might not be you. This might not be the person who is authoring the application. This is the person who has the legal authorization by your agency to sign off on these legally binding materials. So make sure that they have the opportunity to review all of the application and review all of the assurances. That's very important. And then the next section is the eligibility and summary. This is not rated by the reviewers, but this is where you're going to indicate whether or not you're eligible and in what ways you're eligible. The next section, of course, is the readiness, and that's where you're going to start generating some additional points by the peer reviewers, and you're going to be rated. And the following sections are also all rated. And you'll be able to see in the reviewer rubric how each of individual section is rated. And we encourage you to take a look at those reviewer rubrics to see how they're rated and weighted. Next section, or next slide, please. So the readiness section is a fairly important section. This is where you're going to talk about your stakeholders, who's going to help you carry out the work, and how you're going to continue to engage them in the project, not only from the beginning and the design piece of it, but also throughout the continuous improvement process once you receive the receive the grant. So here you should be identifying the stakeholders and the roles they're going to play from the get-go. And what the reviewers are looking for is they want to see that your stakeholders are diverse and that they also represent the student populations that are being targeted. The stakeholders should, at a minimum, should include the local education agency and at least one other partner organization. Other types of stakeholders that you could include here are the students themselves. They could include parents and other types of community organizations or individuals. You should consider like who is in your community is available to help you achieve the goals that you have set out in the rest of your application and what you are trying to achieve. And again, who represents the interests of your students and the priorities for your particular program. And then again, you'll be talking about, and the rest of this section, you'll be talking about who will be able to help you carry out the work moving forward, and how they will be able to be engaged in continuous improvement efforts throughout the lifespan of the project. And this section is also where you'll be uploading the letter of support from the principal of the school that you're targeting. And we have a template that you'll be using, and that's available on our website. So you'll be able to use that and work with the principal to determine in what ways they're going to be able to demonstrate their support for the project. And I think I'm going to hand this off to Nathan.
Yeah, I think it's my turn to talk. So we're going to slide into the next section here on planning and doing. These are more of the heavily weighted sections of the grant application. So they tend to be rather big. I'm going to do the best I can to sort of whittle this down in a way that it's efficient to sort of learn about today. So when you get into the application, you're not necessarily seeing some of these concepts for the first time. So question 8.1 is going to be where you're going to identify your specific needs. These could be needs of students, needs of the families, maybe the system, the LEA, the community at large. What needs have you identified that can be addressed by a 21st Century CLC grant? I can't stress this enough. You would do well to include supporting data as to why that is an identified need. Quantitative data is going to be an important piece to this. Not saying that your qualitative analysis of your needs of your school or your community aren't important, but the strength of this is really if you can show evidence that that need actually exists. Also in this section, you'll be identifying your root causes, as well as identifying existing initiatives or programs that are taking place in your community. We'll dig into those a little bit in the coming slides. So we can move on to slide 24. Once you've established that need and you have some data to show that is your actual need, you're going to move into the root cause analysis. For those who may be a little unfamiliar with the term root cause, or maybe have heard several different definitions, the definition that we sort of work by as a root cause is the reason that a particular need exists. So your reviewers are going to be looking for an analysis of, if you've established that need, what is the actual basis for it and how were you able to get to that point? Your root cause should also include at least one area of strength that you can build upon. Typically in these types of applications, we tend to focus on, the things that we want to fix with the grant funds. And certainly that's an important part of the conversation, but you would also do well to consider what things your schools or communities have going for it that you can build on with these funds to help address the needs or the root causes that you've identified. Next slide. So if you're looking for a tool to sort of get down to what the root cause of an established need is, this is one that we found useful from the National Implementation Research Network, or NERN. It's called the 5 Whys exercise. And there's a template that we've dropped in the chat. Basically, what it is you start with your need, whatever your need statement is. In this example, 75% of students in 3rd grade are reading below grade level. So you would then just go through, you'd ask yourself the question why 5 different times and you'd answer that question. So 75% of students in 3rd grade are reading below grade level. Why? You'd answer that question. Once you have a statement there, you'd ask yourself why again and go through and do that 5 times. After you ask and answer that question why 5 times, it should give you a pretty core function or core root cause as to why 75% of students in 3rd grade are reading below grade level, and that can be used as your root cause statement. One thing I want to caution you on when you go through this exercise is check yourself for implicit bias and deficit thinking and making assumptions about students or families associated with this. We've all been a part of conversations, I think, that might be an assumption on my part, so you can call me on that, but I would assume many of us have been a part of conversations where a need like this, where we say 75% of students at 3rd grade are reading below grade level, and one of the reasons someone throws out is, well, that's because their parents don't read to them. Well, we're making assumptions about those parents, we're making assumptions about those families, and we're sort of applying some of our own standards to families that may not necessarily hold the same space as we do. So avoid thinking about applying your biases and deficit thinking to this exercise, and really think objectively about what it is in our system that that's contributing to students not reading at the grade level that they're at. And again, there's a template for that 5 Whys exercise in the chat if you want to take a look at it. moving into existing initiatives and programs, we're really looking forward to, aligning your services with what's going on in your school district. So thinking of at least 2 existing initiatives, programs, or priorities that you can align your CLC program with. Typically, these include local student or academic standards or state standards, but it can also include other initiatives or programs that your district might be rolling out. Say something along the lines of social emotional learning was one, within the last few years that would be a good example of that. Don't necessarily think of this as aligning with a separate funding source. And certainly when you talk about initiatives and programs that are happening in a school district, they're often tied to resources. So it could serve as both, but I want to caution you to think a little bit about, if you're going to partner with your pupil services team in rolling out a social emotional learning curriculum and after school program, and you're going to tie yourself to that initiative, I don't think there's an expectation that you need to be getting funds from that program. You're just aligning your programming with that. So you're sort of pulling in the same direction as that current initiative. So now again, if there's another grant program that's happening and you're going to kind of tie onto that and there's going to be some exchange of resources or at least coordination of resources, that's something that you can speak to at a later time in your application. Both those things can be true. But as far as this existing initiatives piece, you can take the resource, the coordination of funds point out of it and focus solely on the initiative or the program plan that you're going to tie your CLC program to. There are a couple of tools that NERN has put out as well regarding this. If you're looking at trying to figure out what initiatives are currently in place, NERN has an initiative inventory process. Both the links are in this presentation for the process instructions as well as the template that you can use to work through it. There's also a couple resources on Y for Y regarding continuous education implementation that include components of checking for existing initiatives that you could tie your programming to. All right, so this is really, if all of you are a fan of meat and potatoes or a big steak dinner, this would be the meat and potatoes of the application. This section is rather large, and I'm going to try to keep this rather high level and not get too granular with it because it does have a tendency to get a little thick. But once you're in it, it makes a lot more sense. It's a lot more intuitive. So basically, in this section, your priority is to identify SMART goals based on the state goals that are based on priority areas. And we'll kind of unpack that a little bit in a second. There are 4 state goals for the 21st Century CLC program that you're going to see in the application. Goal number 1 is that all programs will provide a safe, stable, and supportive environment to meet the needs of the target population. Goal number 2 is programs will challenge youth to develop as learners. Goal number 3 is programs will support the development of other skills necessary for academic success. And goal number 4 is programs will engage families in the broader community in student learning. So those are the 4 state goals. For each one of those, there's a series of priority areas underneath each one of those state goals. So your task is going to be to select up to 2 priority areas underneath each state goal. And then within those priority areas, you are to develop up to 2 local SMART goals that align with the defined needs and the root causes that you established in the prior section, if that makes sense. So you kind of pare it down from these large state goals to these priority areas, all the way down to your local goals that are directly tied to the needs that you laid out and the root cause that you laid out in the prior sections. From there, once you've established that, you're going to put together a series of action steps. These action steps are really your activities and services that you're going to do to move towards those stated goals that you've had to address the needs that you identified in your grant application. So these things are going to be, your mentoring services, your literacy programming, your field trips, whatever it is that you plan on doing that addresses that need. You'll also want to make sure that you include the frequency with which these types of programs and activities are going to take place within your program. A quick word about SMART goals. we've seen this definition, or this acronym before, but just to reiterate it, it's specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. You'll also want to make sure that your SMART goals include performance indicators as well as performance measures. There's a bit of a difference between these two. Performance indicators are sort of like the qualitative, what's going to show us when we look at this that we're making progress. The performance measures are the more quantitative pieces of data that you're using to show that you're making more progress. So in the literacy example, an indicator that you're making progress towards your goal is maybe you have like a little, you're noticing that students are reading more, spending more time reading at home or in the after school program than they did before. That's sort of like a fluff qualitative analysis that, yeah, it looks like we're moving in the direction that we need to do. Your performance measures would be their actual assessment scores. And are they actually improving the way that you wanted them to improve? So it's important to include both of those in your SMART goals. So there are a handful of resources. The activity and program SMART goals is there. The connection tool is what we'll talk about on the next slide. The grant application guidelines in Appendix C has some really good language and examples around SMART goals. And then the state goals and priority areas that I spoke about earlier are also linked on this slide, and they are in the chat as well. So we can jump on to the next slide, please. I want you all to give yourself a pat on the back if you're a fan of logic models, because this is kind of what we're going to work through a little bit here. This is a tool that we've developed at DPI and the 21st Century team to sort of help create this alignment between your stated needs, your root cause, your SMART goals, your priority areas, your action steps, and your assessments, so that you're all thinking in this alignment of the needs and root causes that you established are actually being addressed with the action steps that you're performing in your program that are directly tied to the assessment and evaluation piece. If you take nothing else from my spiel today, take that one of the things we're going to be looking for in this application is that there's an alignment across all of those platforms. If you're going to say that one of your needs is literacy, improving literacy scores for your third graders, an action step that includes yoga practice for students, although absolutely an allowable program, an allowable activity, it doesn't necessarily directly address the need to address the literacy scores within the target population. So this tool sort of hopefully helps you drill into that a little bit. And it walks through basically the last few things that we've talked about, from the statement of need to the root cause to the SMART goal. Just to look at this really quickly, all the way on the left-hand side, you'll see that there's a space for you to put what your stated need is, and there's an example of what that statement might look like. Right underneath that is your root cause, and that's where you'll exercise your 5 whys practice to get down to what your root cause statement is. Then in the middle is your SMART goal. The way they have this listed out, which I think is helpful, is it gives you the state SMART goal, safe and supportive environment, and then right underneath that, you'll have your local SMART goal. And remember that local SMART goal needs to be tied to one of the program areas under safe and supportable environment. That's where you'll identify that in the next section. From there, you move over into the action step section as we work our way to the right of the screen. That gives you an opportunity to lay out what your activities or services that you're looking to employ within that after school program. And then it also gives you a space to sort of drill into the frequency of that activity, so you can identify that on your application as well. And then there is a space for an evaluation, which we'll talk to in just a couple of seconds here once we get through this slide. At the bottom, this isn't necessarily a part of the grant application per se directly. I mean, some of the content may spill over, but as far as your ability to sort of plan out what this looks like should you get funding, there is a space to sort of put in, well, what resources would we need to really pull off our activity steps? Maybe that's partners, maybe that's equipment, maybe that's space, whatever it might be. It's a nice little brainstorming spot. And again, if one of those is partners or one of those is staff or one of those is funding, those are pieces that might tie into the application. But I think it's far more useful when it comes to sort of putting together your plan and how you're actually going to execute this if you were to get funding. So that's a really helpful tool. You can use it as much or as little as you'd like. It is not a requirement of the grant application. But if this is your first time writing something like this, or you really just need help organizing your thoughts in writing this application, hopefully this is a tool that you'll find useful. The link to this is in the chat. It is also on the grant competition webpage. So feel free to take a peek over there and use this as much as you would like. It is a fillable PDF. So I think I'm going to kick it over to Allison for some chat on evaluation.
Thanks, Nathan. That was really helpful. Yes, so the evaluation piece. So all of these puzzle pieces of the application are kind of starting to connect, and hopefully you're seeing how they all connect. And the evaluation piece of it is all part of that. Actually, so I think we're actually talking about action planning. I am a little bit thrown off here. Nathan, did you kick it over
That's
to me
me.
a little bit?
I went
You
too
totally
soon.
kicked it over to me a little bit quicker than I
went
was
too soon.
anticipating.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You can I think I had one more slide. Sorry about that.
You do. I'm kicking it right back over to you.
Yeah, I'll take it. I'll take
We're
that.
playing volleyball. I'm giving it back to you.
Sorry about that. I talked a little bit about this before. This is your action steps piece. And maybe we can drill into this a little bit deeper here. Again, your activities and services should really be tied to each of those SMART goals that you had on the local level, that are tied to a priority area, that are nestled underneath the state goal. And all that should be balled in to sort of address your stated need or your stated root cause. Again, you're going to want to include frequency, and on that tool that I gave you, it sort of gives you an opportunity to do that. Another one that I think is an important thing to talk about is avoiding acronyms or internal language. Districts and CBOs have a tendency to have their own like proprietary language and titles for different programs or initiatives or tools that they use. A peer reviewer is, in all likelihood, isn't going to know what that is. And so if you have an initiative that you're tying to that has an acronym, make sure that you spell that out so we know what it is and what the purpose is. Or if there's like a curriculum that you're using, especially with curriculum, because there's so much stuff out there. If there's an acronym, we may not know. So just don't make any assumptions that the person reading it is going to know the language that you're using, if it's acronym or it's proprietary or it's specific to your organization. A couple of resources on Y4Y, and for those of you who may not necessarily know what Y4Y is, it's a U.S. Department of Education tool for 21st century CLCs that has countless resources on it in modules for everything from program design to execution to professional development to academic enrichment content. You name it, they have it. It's all over the place. It's a wonderful resource for practitioners, both at the leadership level and the programmatic level. A couple of resources that they have in there. There's an intentional activity design, mapping needs to activities. Again, it's sort of another iteration of the tool that we laid out, but is another way of sort of thinking and organizing your thoughts around designing activities and services that connect directly with your needs or with your SMART goals. There's also another version of that I think the intentional activity design planner gets a little bit more granular. It gets a little bit more into the actual execution of the activity. But as far as sort of mapping out from what that plan looks like, how those connect to your services and how they're going to be executed, it's a really good start, another way of sort of organizing that connection piece. And the same holds true for the project program planner. Those are all on Y4Y and can be accessed on that system. Next slide, please. Okay, now
I'm taking it back.
now Allison's going to take it back. Sorry about that, everybody.
No, that's okay. You threw me for a second. All right. So yes, evaluation, everyone's favorite topic. So there are multiple evaluation requirements associated with the 21st Century Grant. And so this particular section is where you're going to talk about how you're going to ensure that you have the systems and steps in place to meet the state and federal reporting requirements. And so the question 13.1 will ask you what your plan is to ensure that you will be able to collect the student level data required to meet the federal reporting requirements. And there's quite a bit of information in the application guidelines. So if you're wondering what that means, we encourage you to take a look at the application guidelines to understand exactly what might be required there. If you are a community-based organization or an applicant that is not a school or a school entity, then you will be required to submit a memorandum of understanding in this section between yourself and the school that you're proposing to serve, that demonstrates an agreement that you will have access to the required data to meet this federal reporting requirement. In this section, you'll also be asked to submit a plan on how you will evaluate your ongoing progress towards meeting those objectives that Nathan was talking about earlier, to measure your progress towards your achievement in meeting your goals and what it is that you're setting out to measure and achieve with your program. So you're how you're going to collect data, how you're going to measure improvement, and then how you're going to share that summary of your improvement or your progress with the public. And so this is really important step, and it's not enough just to share it with the school population. This needs to be shared with the general public. And so it might be something like posting it on your website. It could be even sharing it in the local newspaper, sharing it out at the school board and the public meeting notification, that kind of thing, but it should be shared with the general public. But you should undergo a periodic local evaluation kind of to monitor your progress towards meeting your objectives. That's an important piece. Next slide. All right, so we do want to kind of just take a pause at this point. We know we've been sharing a lot of information about the application. We're kind of feeling like you're probably a little bit overwhelmed at this point. So we just want to take a pause in the presentation and everyone take a deep breath and hopefully like just get a little bit of perspective. It's really a great exercise in the successful application process. When you are looking at submitting your proposal, that you are looking at the deadline of February 10th, that you build in some time to ask a friend or some colleagues to take the reviewer rubric and actually look at your proposal against that rubric and provide some feedback and actually evaluate your proposal for you. Because chances are they will see some things that you did not see. And you want to look at, do their scores match? Are they noting things that you did not see, that, or are they seeing conflict? Are they noting things that are conflicting? And use that information to improve your proposal. So build that into your timeline and ensure that you have enough time prior to the submission deadline. So with that, I am going to hand it off, I think, to Jake.
Yes, thank you. All right, so our next section, excuse me, is talking about coordination and sustainability of your programs. So the first part in section 14 will be identifying the current initiatives and programs that are providing funding for your programs right now. So again, we're looking to supplement but not supplant existing funding. So you have to identify and share how you're going to, like, the scope of your program will change, whether that's expanding to serve more families, increasing the amount of resources and activities being offered. However, it's going to change your programming with the 21st Century funds. Next, you'll be describing communication protocols between your program and internal and external stakeholders and partners. So what will that communication look like? When will it happen? How will it happen? All of those things need to be identified. A timeline would be very helpful in kind of outlining steps that need to happen in those partnerships. Also talking about the support that those external stakeholders will provide. Are they going to be volunteers, materials and resources, other in-kind support, or will it be solely fiscal support? And then moving on to sustainability, what local, state, and federal resources are available to support your program? And again, establishing strategies and timelines for utilizing those will be really important. All right, so here are some resources to help you with all of those things. The first link is a guide from the Wallace Foundation. And so there's a lot of links to federal funding that you can coordinate with. We know that food and snacks are a major need for every program. And so because of restrictions in the 21st Century Grant, we encourage sites to look into the after-school snack program and the child and adult care food program. We also have ESSER 3, Title I, Fund 80, the Wisconsin Shared Child Care Subsidy, and the Student Support and Academic Enrichment Grant, all are resources to explore. There are also a lot of other local initiatives that might be occurring that are targeting specific groups in your communities. So examples could be mental health, AODA, suicide prevention, or health literacy programs. And then some examples of populations looking to be served would be American Indian tribal communities, students with disabilities, LGBTQIA populations, just other disadvantaged and vulnerable populations. So do some research into local initiatives as well as exploring these federal options. And I'm now passing back to Allison.
All right. So the application, this slide illustrates how the application is kind of weighted differently by the reviewers. This happens kind of behind the scenes in the application, but we wanted to share this so that you can kind of see when you're preparing your proposal that kind of not all sections are alike. This is also laid out in the rubric. So when you take a look at that, you'll be able to see at the end of the rubric how each of the sections are weighted. It helps you kind of understand, maybe just to give a little bit of pause when you're preparing each one of those sections, what they might be looking for and considering each one of those. But we wanted to make sure that you were aware that each one of these sections are weighted a little bit differently. And with that, I think we're going to take you on a brief tour. I think we have a little bit of time to do this, don't you think? Not a ton of time, but a little bit. So I'm going to see if I can share my screen. All right. Excuse me. So hopefully you all can see this. I'm going to see if I can get rid of some stuff here. Okay, so the first time you go to the portal, you'll land here on this landing page where you'll create an account. And this might be the only time you see this. You'll be asked to create an account, at which point you'll be able to probably save your login and password. And this might be then the only time you come to this page. Now understand that your application will only be assigned to one individual, and we can't advise that you share your login and password with anyone. And so, whoever creates the portal or the password is the person who has access to the application that's being submitted to DPI. We do have the application content available on our webpage. And so we do encourage you, if you're working as a team, that you maybe prepare your responses as a group and then copy and paste it into the portal prior to submission. So once you create your create your login and you submit it, then you're going to move into the portal. So let's see if it actually will let me get in. So then you're going to land here and you'll see here is the, it's telling you what the deadline is, 4 p.m. That is Central Standard Time for those of you that might be operating in a different time zone. And there is a link if you have any questions, you can click there and it'll take you to our email where you can drop an email if you're running into any problems. And then if you are an applicant that is submitting multiple applications, say you're a school district submitting on behalf of multiple schools or community-based organizations submitting to serve multiple schools, you can have multiple applications within the portal at any given time. And so you'll see all of your applications in the system will be here on this landing page here. So I'm going to go into my Happyville test just so I can show you what it looks like. Here in my Happyville test, you will see these 3 parts. In these 3 parts are where all of the sections of the application are. Each of these 3 parts have to be completed in order for the application to be submitted. They don't have to be completed in order. You can go and do them in any order that you want to. They don't have to be done in any kind of sequential order. You can poke around and do them and do them in chunks and save your work and come back to them. They don't have to be done in any particular order. So this is the general information page. As I mentioned, this is just where you're entering the name and all of the contact information, all of that, pretty boilerplate information. This abstract, this is where that first section that's going to be rated by the reviewers, the assurances that will be signed electronically. So you'll want to make sure that the person who has the authority to sign off on them is the person signing it and reviewing all of that it's going to be important. The eligibility is in here. This is where you identify the funding tier. All of that is in here. Here's where the readiness section begins. All of that is built into this part. Now, one thing I want to show you is that some of these are there are many questions in here that are conditional. And I'm going to take you to the action plan to demonstrate that, because I feel like that's an area where there's lots of conditional questions. And what I mean by that is that there are questions where, depending on how you answer the preceding question, will determine on how many questions come after that. So if you look at what we have posted on our website, if you look at the application content on our website, you might look at that and go, holy smokes, this is huge. This application is giant, because it includes all potential questions that you might see on the application. But now keep in mind that a number of these questions are conditional, meaning you might not, and chances are you're not going to see all of these questions because they are conditional depending on how you answered the previous question. So say, for instance, in this action plan section, you have to select a maximum of 2. Well, if you only select 1, you're only going to get 1 of these priority, area sections. Now, if you select 2, you're going to end up getting multiple of them. So hopefully that makes sense. One thing that I always do, the system is set up to save your work as you go, but a good rule of thumb that I always use is to go on and press save periodically every time I finish a section, just because I'm nervous like that. And so I always press save periodically as I go. Once you've completed the section, you can mark it as complete. But if there's a required section that you haven't completed yet, it won't let you move on until you've completed each required section. See, it's okay. I know I haven't completed it. It's not going to let me move on. All right. So the other thing to keep in mind is these buttons will change color once you've completed each section, letting you know that it's completed. And then you'll be able to press submit. You cannot press submit until all of the, see, it wouldn't even let me press it even if I wanted to. You can't press submit until all of these are ready to be, are all completed. Once it's been submitted, you will receive a PDF copy of your submission from DPI. You certainly can print copies of each of these of your application on your own out of the system. You just have to print each section, kind of section by section. So it's a little bit clunky. DPI will though send you a PDF copy of the entire application once you've submitted it to us. But you are certainly welcome to do it yourself out of the system. I'm trying to think, is there anything else, Nathan and Jake, that you can think of that I should show them while I'm in here?
Just another note on the, you had mentioned when you finish one of the parts, it'll say completed. You can still go back into that part and edit it if you want.
Yes.
So it's nothing is really finalized until you click submit.
Yep.
So you know, particularly the things that, you know, can be a little bit there could be some movement on action plan or goals if you want to reassess. You can go back in and edit them after you've completed that section. Just make sure that you don't click submit, because once you do that, you know, then you won't be able to go back and edit anything.
Right. So like even if you press mark complete or something, like you can still go in and edit it. But once you press submit, then it's submitted and you won't be able to go in and change anything. Okay. All right. It's pretty straightforward once you get in there, but if you have any problems, please don't hesitate to click on that contact information, and your questions will be redirected, and we'll help to resolve whatever question you have. Excuse me. All right. Excuse me, I'm gonna go mute. All right. So if you haven't picked up on on this yet, we try to make a lot of resources available to you all to help support you in this process. So we've identified a lot of resources that are helpful to helping you complete a successful application. They're obviously available to you in the chat. We have them in our guidance document. We have them on our website. If you weren't able to click on them in the chat and record them, you can always contact us offline to get them. Most of these should be in the guidelines as well, but if there's something in particular that you would like to access, certainly let us know. But obviously one of our go-to resources is the U4Youth website. And in particular, this course, the Introduction to the 21st Century CLC website or course, is a really wonderful course designed to really introduce you to the 21st century program, and will really help you to understand kind of the ins and outs of the requirements of the 21st century program from the federal kind of big picture lens. It might be really helpful to you when you're completing the application. Obviously, the link to our website and all the application documents, you've had that linked in the chat. We also maintain a list of external organizations on our website, and this might be helpful to you if you're trying to get a sense of what local organizations might be resources to you when you're developing potential partnerships. Understand that this list are not organizations that we have vetted. These are organizations that have been kind of volunteered to us by current grantees as organizations that they have worked with in the past. This is a list that's updated periodically. And so certainly it's a good place to start if you're not sure who to reach out to. And if you're looking for any other potential organizations that you might be able to work with, feel free to reach out to us and we might be able to help you brainstorm other potential partnerships as well. We also have some additional needs assessment resources available on our website, including needs assessment worksheet that we developed in partnership with UWGB. And there's also a Y4Y click and go training available on, on the Y4Y website. Next slide. Some other resources. The National After School Alliance is a fantastic national organization who does a lot of broad sweeping policy work, as well as it's a great clearinghouse for funding resources and best practices and evidence-based practices for out of school time in general. So if you're looking to learn more about out of school time practices and other funding opportunities that might be available, please go to the National After School Alliance. They're a wonderful resource. The National After School Association, a membership organization, they're kind of my go-to for all things quality related. They do a tremendous amount of work related to quality measures for out of school time programs, as well as quality and for staff, and just a wonderful resource when trying to look at how to develop high quality programs in general. And of course, Y4Y. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel here. If there's anything that you need for your program in terms of materials, guidebooks, worksheets, trainings for your staff, whether it's a 10-minute training or how to do, STEM learning in after-school programs, or social emotional learning, or developing a staffing guidebook. I mean, all of these things are available on the Y4Y website. They're a tremendous resource. And our friends at the Wisconsin After School Network, they are our homegrown state network doing a tremendous amount of work here in Wisconsin for out of school time. They are a great resource to help support all of you doing the work and are there to support you in helping grow your programs. I encourage you to reach out to them and explore their website. They are also providing a lot of trainings to develop staff and support staff. So certainly reach out to the Wisconsin After School Network. And then our website as well. We try to keep it updated with resources and point you in the direction of opportunities that might be available to the out of school time field, as well as, of course, 21st century as well. Next slide. Okay, in summary, all the applications need to be submitted by 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. The system will close at 4 p.m. So those applications have to be submitted. They will not be accepted after that on February 10th. Again, you have to click submit in order for them to be submitted, in order for them to be accepted. They won't be considered if they haven't been submitted. All of those sections have to be completed in the system in order for the system to allow you to click submit. And a confirmation email will be sent to you once they've been submitted. Please allow DPI some time to get those confirmation emails out to you. So we understand that submission deadline is on a Friday, so please give us some time to get those confirmation emails out to you. DPI will email you a PDF copy of the application within 48 business hours of submission. So we will be working to get those pretty PDF copies out to you. But like I said, you can also print off a copy of what you submit. It just won't be quite as nice as the PDF copy that we will be sending you. Next. And we have a few minutes where we can take some live questions. If you want to stick around, we will keep we will also stay online a little bit longer to take some questions live. We'll go to the next slide so that we can also share contact information. If you want to contact us one-on-one, we can take those questions too. The other thing I want to share before we go to questions is that we are also soliciting applications for reviewers, so peer reviewers. So if you sat through this workshop and you thought, you know, I'm not quite sure I'm ready to write an application, but I'd be really interested in maybe serving as a peer reviewer. Well, we are currently soliciting peer reviewers for the competition. And so the online application to be a peer reviewer is live. So we'll drop that in the chat as well. So feel free to either submit an application to do that or share it if you know others that might be interested in participating as a peer reviewer. And yes, the presentation will be shared on our competition webpage, so you'll have access to that as well. And with that, I think we'll allow folks to ask questions.
Looks like John has a question. John?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the presentation and thank you for taking my question. We have 2 elementary schools in our school district that are looking at applying for this grant. Both are probably going to be, the partner that's probably going to be the biggest load will probably be Boys and Girls Club. And so they have sites at both schools and they have off sites as well. Would your suggestion be to write as one grant or 2 separate grants for the 2 separate schools? Because I know you talked about this is a competition, and since, I mean, the needs assessment could be different, but you know, we've been coordinating. I think a lot of the needs assessments might be pretty similar. I don't know, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so great question. So that's always a really hard question to answer. Because you're asking kind of the gambler in me to hedge my bets about that. I think, so one thing to keep in mind is that all of the services need to take place in one location. So if you're providing services for feeder schools, then you need to think about, are you going to be transporting all the students to one location, or is your idea that you're going to be serving them in multiple locations? If you're thinking that you want to be able to serve them in 2 different schools, then you would probably want to apply for 2 different grants. Okay, so that's something to think about. If you're thinking that the students from the 2 different schools would be going to one centralized location, then that might be a different conversation.
There's another
and then I think the other piece of it for me would be the demand question, like how many, like you know, what is currently being provided and how many students do you think, you know, what is the need and what is the demand? I mean, that's kind of what's jumping to mind for me. I don't know. What do you think, Nathan? I heard you kind of.
Yeah. Sorry, I cut you off there, Allison. My bad. I thought you were done. The other piece that you should keep in mind is your applicant school must serve, of all the students that you serve, like the actual site that you're applying for needs to serve at least 51% of the total students that are being served. So if you have, if school A and school B have similar needs, but you anticipate more students from school B coming over to school A as a feeder school, you're going to be out of compliance, because the grant that you wrote, the site that you wrote the grant for, needs to serve the majority of students in the program. So I think, sort of getting back to Allison's comment on need and what's the market for the program, there's some language within the management of the grant itself that is applicable to that question as well. And then I think scope always comes into the conversation. As someone who's written these grants both for individual sites as well as multiple, we do have to think a lot about, in terms of the goals that we're trying to address and the services that were being offered to however many students, is that realistic, right? And if you're looking at 2 sites under one grant, is the funding and the resources available within that grant not sufficient enough to meet the actual needs that you're proposing in the grant? And I think that's a question that only applicants can really answer. And that may guide you towards either writing one grant with a feeder school or writing 2 separate grants for 2 separate sites, purely based on scope and what capacity the grant has to meet the needs that you've identified. Did I cover everything? Did we cover everything for you, John?
Yeah, if I could follow up, because the K through 2nd grade stays on site at both schools, and then there's other feeder schools that come here, and I think we will meet that 51% for those 2 separate schools. But then 3rd through 5th goes to an offsite. So the 2 separate offsites. So we kind of have like our boundaries kind of split as north and south in regards to Boys and Girls Club. And so will we actually have potential for 4 grants, applying for 4 grants then? Do you know what I'm asking?
I think so, but if I may, this conversation might get a little nuanced. So some of these questions, I'm wondering if you want to follow up with either Allison, Jake, or myself, and we can sort of dig into this a little bit deeper with you, if that's okay.
Perfect. Yeah, that's a great idea.
All right. Thanks, John.
You bet. Thank you.
Any other questions out there? All right. If not, we're at time. So we're actually over by a couple of minutes. I don't know if Jake, Allison, if you have any parting words to say, but I enjoyed our session today. It was nice to see so many names and faces, both familiar and unfamiliar. Hopefully you gleaned some resources out of our chat today. Yeah, and best of luck as you move forward.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank everybody for joining us. I'm excited to see the interest, and I can't wait to see the different proposals that come forth. And it's such a wonderful opportunity for the students of Wisconsin. So thank you everyone for joining us. And certainly if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out and to any of us. We're happy to be of whatever assistance we can as you navigate this process. Best of luck.
Well said. Yeah, thank you, everybody.